The conference room was packed that Tuesday morning. Almost 40 people crammed into a space meant for 25, with some folks standing against the back wall, coffee cups in hand. It was the quarterly review meeting, the kind everyone dreaded but had to attend. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat, and someone had brought in donuts that nobody was touching. Rachel sat in the middle row, her laptop open, reviewing her notes one last time. She'd been with the company for 3 years now, working as a financial analyst in the operations department. Nothing flashy, but she was good at her job. Really good, actually. Her reports were always on time, her numbers were accurate, and clients seemed to like working with her. She'd never been late, never missed a deadline, and her performance reviews had always been solid. The meeting started like it always did. Boring slides about revenue targets, market trends, and quarterly objectives. People nodded along, half paying attention, half thinking about the emails piling up in their inboxes. Rachel's mind wandered a bit too. She had a client call at 11 and wanted to prep for it. Then came the part where department heads reviewed recent projects. That's when things took a turn. Robert, the department manager, stood at the front of the room with a laser pointer in hand. He was one of those guys who always wore expensive suits and talked a bit too loud, like he wanted to make sure everyone knew he was in charge. He'd been with the company for about 5 years, and honestly, most people tried to stay out of his way. He had a temper, and when things went wrong, he had a habit of making it everyone's problem. "All right, let's talk about the Patterson account," Robert said, clicking to the next slide. Rachel's stomach dropped a little. That was her project. Well, mostly her project. She'd worked on it for 6 weeks, putting together financial projections and risk assessments. There had been one small issue last week. A tiny error in one of the spreadsheets where a formula had pulled the wrong cell reference. She'd caught it herself, fixed it within an hour, and sent out the correction. The client hadn't even noticed. It was the kind of mistake that happens sometimes, especially on projects with hundreds of data points. "So, we had a situation with this account," Robert continued, his voice taking on an edge that made a few people sit up straighter. "Rachel here decided to send out a report with completely wrong numbers. Wrong projections, wrong analysis, basically wrong everything." Rachel felt her face get hot. That wasn't true. It had been one small formula error, not the entire report. She started to raise her hand to clarify, but Robert wasn't done. "I mean, honestly, I don't know how someone makes it 3 years in this company and still can't get basic Excel formulas right," he said, looking directly at her now. The room had gone completely silent. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. "This is stuff we teach interns on day 1. Are we running a charity here, or are we supposed to be professionals?" A few people glanced at Rachel, then quickly looked away. The guy sitting next to her suddenly became very interested in his phone. Rachel felt like she couldn't breathe right. Her hands were shaking slightly, so she put them under the table where nobody could see. And you know what the worst part is? Robert was on a roll now, pacing back and forth at the front of the room like he was giving some kind of performance. "I had to personally call the client and apologize for her incompetence. Do you know how that makes our department look? How that makes me look?" Rachel wanted to say something, wanted to defend herself, but her throat felt tight. She could feel tears starting to form in her eyes, and she fought them back hard. "Not here, not in front of everyone." She bit the inside of her cheek, focusing on that small pain to keep from crying. "I'm starting to wonder if maybe some people just aren't cut out for this kind of work," Robert continued. "Maybe some people got lucky in the hiring process and ended up in positions they're not actually qualified for. Because let me tell you, if this is the standard of work we're accepting, we might as well close up shop now." Someone coughed awkwardly. A woman near the front shifted in her seat, looking uncomfortable. But nobody said anything. Nobody stood up for her. They all just sat there, watching this happen like it was a car crash they couldn't look away from. "Maybe you should think about whether this is really the right career path for you." "Rachel," Robert said, his voice dripping with condescension, "because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like it's working out." Rachel felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. 3 years of hard work, of staying late, of going above and beyond, and this was how she was being treated, in front of everyone. In front of people she worked with every day, people she'd helped on their projects, people she considered friends. The meeting moved on to other topics, but Rachel didn't hear any of it. She sat there, staring at her laptop screen without really seeing it, just trying to hold herself together until she could get out of that room. The minutes crawled by like hours. She could feel people stealing glances at her, probably wondering if she was okay but too afraid to actually ask. When the meeting finally ended after what felt like an eternity, people filed out quickly. A few gave her sympathetic looks, but most just avoided eye contact altogether. Rachel grabbed her laptop and headed straight for the bathroom, walking as fast as she could without actually running. She made it into a stall, locked the door, and finally let the tears come. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably that 11 o'clock meeting reminder. She ignored it. Right now, all she could think about was Robert's words echoing in her head. Incompetent, not qualified. Wrong career path. After everything she'd done for this company, after all the late nights and weekends, after all the projects she'd saved and clients she'd won over, this was how she was valued. She stayed in that bathroom stall for 15 minutes, trying to pull herself together, trying to figure out what to do next. One thing was clear, though. Something had to change. She couldn't keep working like this, couldn't keep letting herself be treated like this, but right now, in this moment, all she felt was humiliated, small, and completely powerless. By lunchtime, everyone in the office knew what had happened. That's how it works in corporate buildings. News travels faster than the elevators, especially when it's dramatic. Rachel could feel people looking at her differently as she walked back to her desk. Some faces showed sympathy, others showed relief that it hadn't been them up there getting torn apart. She tried to focus on work, but her hands were still shaky when she typed. Every few minutes, she'd catch herself staring at her screen without actually reading anything. The words from that meeting kept playing on repeat in her head like a song she couldn't get rid of. Around 1 o'clock, her desk phone rang. It was Kevin from accounting, someone she'd worked with on several projects over the past 2 years. They'd always had a good working relationship, nothing more than professional, but he was one of the genuinely nice people in the office. "Hey, you got a minute?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Sure," Rachel said, though she really didn't want to talk to anyone. "Meet me in the coffee shop downstairs? I'll buy you a coffee." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a corner booth of the building's ground floor cafe. The place was half empty, just a few people from other companies tapping away on their laptops. Kevin slid a large vanilla latte across the table to her. "I wanted to check on you after this morning," he said. "That was brutal." "I'm sorry you had to go through that." Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Thanks, I'm still processing it, honestly. I don't even know what I did to deserve that. It was one tiny error that I fixed immediately." Kevin leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Look, I'm going to tell you something, and I probably shouldn't, but you need to know. This isn't about you or your work." Rachel looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "Robert does this." "This is what he does," Kevin said, glancing around to make sure nobody was listening. "He picks someone, usually someone who's good at their job, and he tears them down in public. Makes himself look tough, like he's this no-nonsense manager who demands excellence. But really, he's just a bully who gets off on making people feel small." "But why me? Why now?" Kevin hesitated, then leaned forward. "You remember Jennifer? She left about 18 months ago. Yeah, she went to work for that tech startup downtown. She didn't just leave. She quit because of Robert. Same thing happened to her. He humiliated her in a meeting over something minor, kept writing her about it for weeks. She was a mess. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore and left." Kevin took a sip of his coffee. "And before her, there was David. Same story. Good employee, great work. Then Robert just went after him until he quit." Rachel felt something shift inside her. This wasn't about her performance. This was a pattern. "Why doesn't anyone stop him?" "Because he's good at protecting himself," Kevin explained. "He brings in decent numbers. He schmoozes with upper management, and when people quit, he spins it like they couldn't handle the pressure or weren't team players. Plus, most people are too scared to speak up. They figure if they keep their heads down and don't make waves, they won't be next. That's messed up. It really is." Kevin agreed. "But here's the thing. A few of us have been keeping track. I've got emails, notes from meetings, dates, and details of when he's gone off on people. There are 3 of us who've been documenting everything for about a year now." Rachel blinked. "Seriously, why?" "Because eventually he's going to push too far, and when he does, we want to make sure there's a record. What happened to you this morning? That might be the push we've been waiting for. That was witnessed by 40 people. He can't spin that away easily." For the first time since the meeting, Rachel felt something other than shame. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was determination, but it was better than the helpless feeling she'd been carrying all morning. They talked for another 30 minutes. Kevin told her about other incidents, other people who'd been on the receiving end of Robert's temper. It was eye-opening and infuriating at the same time. How had this been going on so long? How had nobody in HR or upper management noticed? When Rachel got back to her desk, there was a sticky note on her monitor. "We saw what happened. That wasn't okay. Here if you need anything." It was signed by 2 people from her team. Then she checked her email and found 3 more messages from colleagues offering support. One was from Lisa, a senior analyst who'd been with the company for 7 years. "I should have said something in that meeting, and I didn't. I'm sorry. But please know that most of us don't see you the way Robert described. You're one of the best analysts we have, and everyone knows it except apparently him." Rachel read that email twice. Then she opened a new document on her computer and started writing down everything she could remember from the meeting. Every word Robert had said, every insult, every false claim. If Kevin and the others were building a case, she wanted to contribute. Meanwhile, 2 floors up, Robert was having lunch with another department manager, Greg, in the executive dining area. He was in a great mood, laughing and joking like nothing had happened. "You should have seen her face," Robert was saying, gesturing with his fork. "I swear I thought she was going to cry right there in the meeting." That's how you keep people sharp. You can't let them get comfortable or they'll start slacking off. Greg looked uncomfortable. "I don't know, man. That seemed pretty harsh." "She's a solid employee from what I've heard." "Solid?" Robert scoffed. "She made a mistake that almost cost us a client. Someone had to hold her accountable. It was a minor formula error though, right? Those happen." Robert waved that away. "In this business, minor mistakes become major problems. I run a tight ship in my department, and people need to know there are consequences. That's what leadership looks like. Sometimes you have to be the bad guy." Greg just nodded, but he wasn't convinced. He'd heard rumors about Robert's management style before. This lunch was making those rumors seem a lot more credible. Back at her desk, Rachel had made a decision. She opened her laptop and started updating her resume. Not because she was giving up or because Robert was right about her, but because she needed options. She needed to know that if things didn't change, she had a way out. She wasn't going to be trapped like some of the others had been, but she also sent an email to Kevin. Just 3 words. "Count me in." Whatever they were building, whatever case they were putting together, she wanted to be part of it. She was done being quiet. She was done accepting this as just how things were. The next morning, Robert would get a meeting request that would change everything. But right now, he was still completely unaware that the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Thursday morning started normally for Robert. He grabbed his usual espresso from the cafe downstairs, rode the elevator to the 5th floor, and settled into his office with the Wall Street Journal. He had a full day planned, back-to-back meetings, the kind of busy schedule that made him feel important. At 9:15, his assistant knocked on his door. "Robert, HR needs to see you." "They said it's urgent." He looked up, mildly annoyed. "When?" "Now. They're waiting for you in conference room B." Robert frowned. HR rarely called unscheduled meetings, but he figured it was probably some new policy rollout or compliance training nonsense. He grabbed his phone and headed down the hall, not particularly worried. When he opened the door to conference room B, his confidence faltered for just a second. Patricia from HR was there, along with someone he recognized as the regional director, Michael Chen. Michael was based out of the downtown office and only came to their building for serious matters. This wasn't a policy meeting. "Robert, have a seat," Patricia said. Her tone was professional but cold, nothing like her usual friendly demeanor. "What's this about?" Robert asked, sitting down across from them. "I've got a client call in 30 minutes. "You'll need to reschedule that," Michael said flatly. "We need to discuss some serious concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your management conduct." Robert felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his face neutral. "Management conduct? I'm not sure what you mean." Patricia opened a folder in front of her. It was thick, way too thick for comfort. "We've received multiple formal complaints about your behavior toward employees in your department. The most recent incident occurred Tuesday during the quarterly review meeting. Do you remember what happened in that meeting?" "I gave feedback to an employee who made a significant error," Robert said carefully. "That's part of my job as a manager." "Feedback," Michael repeated, his voice flat. "Is that what you call it? Because we have statements from 17 people who were in that room, and they describe it very differently. Would you like to hear some of their accounts? Robert shifted in his seat. 17 people? Who had bothered to file statements? He'd assumed everyone would just move on like they always did. Patricia didn't wait for him to answer. She started reading from the papers in front of her. You told Rachel she was incompetent. You questioned whether she was qualified for her position. You suggested she got lucky in the hiring process and should consider other career options. You did this in front of nearly 40 colleagues. Does that sound accurate? I may have been direct, but she needed to understand the seriousness of her mistake, Robert said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. Sometimes you have to be tough to get through to people. This generation expects constant praise and can't handle criticism. This isn't about generational differences, Michael cut in. This is about professional conduct. But let's move beyond Tuesday. We've been looking into your management history, and frankly, what we've found is troubling. Patricia flipped through more pages. In the past 2 years, your department has had a turnover rate of 43%. That's more than double the company average. We've gone back and reviewed exit interviews. Would you like to know what former employees said about why they left? Robert said nothing. His jaw was tight. Jennifer Porter, who left 18 months ago, her exit interview notes say she felt bullied and disrespected. David Nguyen, who left 2 years ago, same story. We found similar patterns in interviews with 4 other former employees from your team. They all cited hostile work environment and aggressive management as reasons for leaving. People leave jobs all the time, Robert said. Sometimes people just can't handle high-performance environments. I run a department that demands excellence. Excellence, Michael said, and there was an edge to his voice now. Let's talk about excellence. Do you remember the Morrison account? The $2.3 million contract we secured 6 weeks ago? Of course. That was a huge win for the department. For the department, Michael repeated. Interesting. Because according to our records, Rachel led that entire project. She developed the proposal, she built the financial model she presented to the client, but in your report to senior management, you took credit for it. You presented it as your strategic win. Robert's face went pale. I oversee all projects in my department. As the manager, those wins reflect my leadership. That's one way to spin it, Patricia said. But we pulled the emails. The client specifically requested to work with Rachel again. They praised her expertise and professionalism by name. They never mentioned you at all because you barely had any contact with them. Michael leaned forward. And it's not just that account. We found 3 other major projects over the past year, where you claimed credit for work your team members did. You presented their analyses and proposals in executive meetings as if they were your own ideas. The room felt smaller suddenly. Robert could feel sweat forming on his back. I don't know where you're getting this information, but someone is clearly trying to make me look bad. Multiple someones, actually, Patricia said. We have documentation going back 14 months. Emails, meeting notes, project files. 3 of your current employees have been keeping detailed records of incidents involving verbal abuse, credit theft, and intimidation tactics. Robert's mind was racing. Who had betrayed him? Kevin, Lisa? It had to be someone with access to a lot of information. Here's what else concerns us, Michael continued. We looked at performance reviews you've written for your team. Consistently, you've rated high performers as merely adequate. You've blocked raises and promotions for people who, by every objective measure, deserved them. And when we looked at why, a pattern emerged. The better someone performed, the more you seemed to undermine them. That's ridiculous. I evaluate people fairly based on their work. Patricia pulled out another sheet. Last year, you rated Rachel as meets expectations in her annual review. Yet she brought in more revenue than any other analyst in the department. She had 0 client complaints and actually received written praise from 3 different clients. How does that equal just meets expectations? Robert didn't have an answer for that. His hands were clenched under the table. We spoke with other managers, Michael said. They told us about conversations where you bragged about keeping your team in line, about not letting employees get comfortable or think they were irreplaceable. You've created a culture of fear in your department, and it's been costing this company talented people for years. I want to speak with my team, Robert said. Let me talk to them. This is all a misunderstanding. That's not going to happen, Patricia said firmly. As of right now, you're being placed on immediate administrative leave while we complete a full investigation. You need to collect your personal belongings and leave the building today. You'll be paid during the leave period, but you're not to contact anyone in your department or attempt to influence this investigation in any way. You can't be serious, Robert said, his voice rising. I've been with this company for 5 years. I've built that department from the ground up. You've had 5 years to treat people with respect, Michael said, standing up. Instead, you've bullied, belittled, and taken advantage of good employees. We have a legal obligation to provide a safe work environment, and based on what we've seen, you've been creating the opposite of that. Robert sat there stunned. This couldn't be happening. Just 2 days ago, he'd been in complete control. Now his career was imploding, and he didn't even fully understand how it had happened so fast. Security will escort you to your office to collect your things, Patricia said. We'll be in touch once the investigation is complete. As Robert walked out of that conference room with a security guard trailing behind him, he passed several employees in the hallway. They all suddenly found reasons to look at their phones or study papers they were carrying. Nobody made eye contact. Word spread through the office within minutes. Robert was being walked out. For the first time in years, people in that department felt like they could breathe a little easier. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, the office felt different. People talked more freely in the break room. There was less tension in meetings. It was like someone had opened all the windows in a stuffy room and let fresh air flow through. Rachel went to work each day not knowing what would happen next. Part of her worried that upper management would find a way to sweep everything under the rug, maybe give Robert a slap on the wrist and send him back. She'd seen it happen at other companies. The guy at the top gets protected while everyone else just has to deal with it. But then things started happening that surprised her. First, HR called her in for a meeting. She walked into Patricia's office expecting the worst. Maybe they'd decided she was too much trouble and were going to let her go. Instead, Patricia stood up and did something unexpected. She apologized. "Rachel, I want to say I'm sorry," Patricia began, gesturing for her to sit down. "Our HR department failed you. We should have caught Robert's behavior pattern years ago. We had exit interviews, we had complaints, but we didn't connect the dots. That's on us, and I want you to know we're making changes to prevent this from happening again." Rachel didn't know what to say. She'd been preparing for a fight, not an apology. "We've completed most of our investigation," Patricia continued, "and what we found was worse than we initially thought." Robert had been systematically taking credit for his team's work for years. He manipulated performance reviews to make himself look better by comparison. He blocked promotions and raises for talented employees so they wouldn't threaten his position. "I had no idea it was that calculated," Rachel said quietly. "Neither did we. But once we started pulling records and talking to people, the pattern was undeniable." Patricia pulled out a folder. "I want to show you something. This is the client feedback form from the Morrison account, the big one you landed 2 months ago." Rachel took the paper. She'd never seen this before. The client had given the project a perfect score, and specifically mentioned her by name 3 times. They called her professional, insightful, and said they looked forward to working with her on future projects. There was one line at the bottom that made her chest tight. "Rachel is exactly the kind of person that makes us confident in our partnership with your company." "Robert never showed you this, did he?" Patricia asked. "No, I had no idea they'd said any of this. He buried it, and in his report to senior management, he presented the whole project as his strategic victory. He never mentioned your name once." Rachel felt anger rising in her chest, but it was different from the shame she'd felt during that meeting. This was cleaner, justified. "So what happens now?" Patricia closed the folder. "We've made our decision about Robert. He's being terminated, effective immediately. The legal team reviewed everything, and they said his conduct created significant liability for the company. But more than that, it's just the right thing to do. We can't keep someone in a leadership position who treats people this way." Rachel let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Good. There's something else," Patricia said. "We need to fill Robert's position. And after reviewing performance data, client feedback, and talking to your colleagues, we'd like to offer you the role. Department manager, with a salary increase of 38% and full benefits that come with the management level." Rachel stared at her. "You're offering me his job?" "We're offering you the job you've essentially been doing for the past year, just without the title or the pay. You've been leading projects, managing client relationships, and from what we can tell, you've been the person your team actually goes to for guidance. We're just making it official." It was almost too much to process. A week ago, she'd been humiliated in front of 40 people and told she wasn't qualified for her current job. Now she was being offered a promotion to manager. I need to think about it, Rachel said, of course. Take a few days. Talk it over with people you trust. We just want you to know that we value what you bring to this company, and we're sorry it took this long to show it properly. That evening, Rachel met Kevin and Lisa at a restaurant downtown. They'd become closer over the past few weeks, bonded by the whole situation with Robert. When she told them about the offer, Kevin nearly spit out his beer. Are you kidding? They offered you the manager position? They did. I don't know if I should take it, though. Why wouldn't you? Lisa asked. This is what you deserve. You've been doing that job anyway. Because what if I can't do it? What if Robert was right and I'm not cut out for leadership? Kevin shook his head. Rachel, listen to me. Robert wasn't right about anything. He was a bully who felt threatened by talented people. You're good at what you do. Everyone knows it except apparently you. But managing people is different. What if I mess it up? Lisa leaned forward. You know what the difference is between you and Robert? You actually care about whether you do a good job. You care about the people you'd be managing. That's already like 90% of what makes a good manager. The rest you can learn. They talked for 2 more hours, going through pros and cons, discussing what kind of leader Rachel wanted to be. By the end of the night, she'd made her decision. Monday morning, she walked into Patricia's office and accepted the position. The announcement went out that afternoon. There was an all-staff email from the CEO about leadership changes in the department. It didn't mention Robert by name, but it emphasized the company's commitment to respectful workplace culture and said they had 0 tolerance for bullying or harassment. Then it announced Rachel as the new department manager. Her phone started buzzing immediately. Congratulations text from colleagues. An email from the client on the Morrison account saying they were thrilled she'd be their main point of contact going forward. Even a message from Jennifer, the woman who'd quit 18 months ago because of Robert, saying she'd heard the news through the grapevine and was happy to see things changing. But there was also an email that made Rachel pause. It was from someone she didn't know, applying for an open position in the department. The last line said, I left this company 2 years ago because of a hostile work environment, but I've heard there's been a change in leadership. I'd love the opportunity to come back if you're willing to consider me. It was David, one of the people Robert had driven out. Rachel sat back in her chair, looking around the office that was now hers. The same desk where Robert used to sit, but it felt completely different. Through the glass wall she could see her team now working at their desks. A few of them looked up and saw her. They smiled. Real smiles, not the nervous ones people used to give Robert. She opened her laptop and started typing a response to David. We'd love to talk to you about coming back. Things are different now. Meanwhile, across town, Robert sat in his apartment scrolling through job listings. He'd sent out 20 applications in the past week. So far, he'd gotten 3 rejection emails and 17 non-responses. His phone rang. It was a recruiter from a company he'd applied to. Hi, Robert. Thanks for your interest in the position. I just wanted to follow up on a few things. We've been doing some reference checks, and we've heard some concerning feedback about your management style. Can you speak to that? Robert's jaw clenched. I don't know what you've heard, but I ran a high-performance department. Sometimes that requires tough leadership. I see. Well, we've actually heard from multiple sources that there were issues with how you treated employees. That's a concern for us given the collaborative nature of this role. The call ended 5 minutes later with the recruiter saying they'd be in touch, which Robert knew was code for don't hold your breath. He threw his phone onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, he was starting to realize that actions actually had consequences. All those years of treating people badly, taking credit, pushing people down to make himself look better. It was all catching up to him, and there was no way to spin his way out of it this time. 3 months later, Rachel sat in her office looking at the quarterly report. The numbers were better than she'd expected. Revenue was up 17% from the previous quarter. Client satisfaction scores had jumped significantly, but the number that mattered most to her was employee retention. 0 departures in 3 months. For a department that used to lose people every few weeks, that felt like a real achievement. There was a knock on her door. It was Kevin holding 2 coffees. Got a minute? He asked. Always. Come in. He handed her one of the cups and settled into the chair across from her desk. I wanted to give you some feedback if that's okay. Rachel smiled. You know I'm always open to feedback. That's kind of the whole point. I've been here 7 years, Kevin started. I've worked under 3 different managers in that time, and I've got to say, the past 3 months have been the best work experience I've had at this company. Maybe ever. Really? Really? You know what's different? People actually want to come to work now. The morning meetings don't feel like walking into a firing squad. When someone makes a mistake, they're not terrified to admit it because they know you'll help them fix it instead of destroying them in front of everyone. Rachel felt her throat get tight. That means a lot. I've been worried I'm not doing enough. You're doing more than enough. Last week when I messed up that projection and had to redo it, you sat with me for an hour helping me figure out where I went wrong. Robert would have screamed at me and used it against me in my performance review. You turned it into a learning moment. That's just basic decency, though. You'd be surprised how rare that is, Kevin said. People are actually collaborating now, sharing ideas without worrying someone's going to steal credit. The whole energy is different. After Kevin left, Rachel checked her email. There was a message from the client on the Morrison account. They wanted to expand their contract and add another project worth $1.8 million. They specifically requested that Rachel's team handle it. She forwarded it to her team with a note. This is because of the incredible work all of you did. Thank you. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. Did you see the company newsletter? Check page 3. Rachel pulled up the newsletter. On page 3 was an article about workplace culture initiatives. There was a photo of their department team. Everyone smiling genuinely, not those forced corporate headshot smiles. The caption talked about how leadership changes had resulted in improved performance and employee satisfaction. Her name was mentioned as an example of promoting from within, based on merit and character. It felt surreal sometimes. 4 months ago, she'd been sitting in a bathroom stall crying, convinced her career was over. Now she was being held up as a model for positive leadership. But it wasn't always easy. There were hard days. Days when she had to have difficult conversations with underperforming team members. Days when projects went sideways and she had to figure out how to fix them. Days when she doubted herself and wondered if she was really qualified for this role. The difference was she had people she could talk to now. A support system. And she'd built the same thing for her team. Weekly one-on-one meetings where people could raise concerns. An open-door policy that she actually meant. Not just words on a poster. A group chat where people shared wins and supported each other through challenges. One afternoon, she got an unexpected visitor. David, the employee who'd left 2 years ago because of Robert, was back. They'd hired him last month and he was settling back into the department. Hey, you got a second? He asked from her doorway. Sure, sit down. How's it going so far? Honestly, it's like coming back to a completely different place, David said. I mean, same office, same desks, but everything else is different. In a good way, I'm glad. I know it was rough before. Rough is putting it mildly, David said. When I left, I told myself I'd never work in corporate again. Robert had me convinced I was terrible at my job, that I didn't belong in this field. I spent a year doing freelance work just to avoid dealing with another manager like him. I'm sorry you went through that. The thing is, coming back has shown me it wasn't me. I'm doing good work. My projects are going well. And when I have questions or need help, I don't feel stupid for asking. That's all because of how you run things now. After he left, Rachel thought about how many other people might have left the industry entirely because of bad managers. How much talent was lost because someone with power decided to use it to tear people down instead of build them up. She pulled out her notebook and started writing down ideas for a leadership workshop she wanted to propose to. Char, not the usual boring corporate training, but something real. How to give feedback without destroying someone's confidence. How to share credit. How to create psychological safety on teams. How to recognize when you're being a bully instead of a leader. Meanwhile, Robert was having a very different experience. He'd finally gotten a job offer after 4 months of searching, but it was 3 levels below where he'd been. A senior analyst position at a smaller company, making 40% less than his previous salary. He'd tried to negotiate, tried to talk about his experience managing a department, but the hiring manager had been clear. We checked your references extensively, she'd told him. We're willing to give you a chance, but you'll be in an individual contributor role with no direct reports. We need to see how you work with a team before we'd consider you for any leadership position. It was humbling in a way he'd never experienced, having to report to someone younger than him, sitting in team meetings where his opinion carried no more weight than anyone else's, working on projects where he couldn't just delegate the hard parts to someone else. The worst part was watching his former department from afar. He still had connections at his old company, people who'd send him updates. He'd heard about Rachel's promotion, about the improved numbers, about people actually wanting to work there now. Every update felt like a knife twist. One evening, he ran into Kevin at a coffee shop downtown. It was awkward. Kevin was polite but distant. "How's the new job?" Kevin asked. "It's fine." "Different," Robert said. "How are things at the old place?" "Really good, actually. Best they've been in years." There was an uncomfortable silence. Robert wanted to say something, wanted to defend himself or explain his side. But what was there to say? The evidence had been clear. The pattern had been undeniable. "Look, Robert," Kevin said finally, "I hope you're learning something from all this. You had talented people working for you, and you made their lives miserable. That catches up with you eventually." After Kevin left, Robert sat there with his coffee getting cold thinking about that. He'd spent years believing his approach was right. That being tough was the same as being effective. That fear was a legitimate management tool. Now he was paying the price for those beliefs. Back at the office, Rachel was wrapping up her day. She looked around at the empty desks, the quiet office. In a few hours, this place would fill up again with people who didn't dread coming to work. People who felt valued and supported. People who were doing their best work because they weren't spending half their energy worrying about being humiliated. She turned off her computer and grabbed her bag. As she walked to the elevator, she passed the conference room where Robert had torn her apart 4 months ago. The room where she'd felt smaller than she'd ever felt in her professional life. That moment had changed everything. Not because it had broken her, but because it had revealed a truth that needed to be exposed. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes. Her phone buzzed one more time. It was a message from Patricia in HR. "Just got the engagement survey results. Your department scored highest in the entire company for job satisfaction and team culture. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Rachel smiled as she stepped into the elevator. She wasn't perfect. She made mistakes. But she was trying to be the kind of leader she'd needed when she was sitting in that bathroom stall trying not to cry. And apparently that was making all the difference.